I hadn't actually written very much down at all. I was not assuming that this morning that I would be giving a speech this evening. This morning was rather chaotic and nerve-wracking, but not, in fact, as nerve-wracking as the first NatCon Europe conference that I attended, because that was in Rome in February 2020, if I recall. And the reason I was so nervous was that it was a day or 2 days after Brexit Day, which Nigel Farage referred to in his speech this morning. We all, or many of us, went to Parliament Square and we celebrated our newfound freedoms, the freedoms of an independent nation, sovereignty regained, and as it would turn out, a day that would mean that the Conservative Party was free at last to wreak havoc on Britain without any help at all from Brussels. And the morning after Brexit Day, a friend of mine and I, we went with some trepidation, sheepishly, to Rome. We were very nervous. We'd been assured that World War III was about to break out after Brexit Day. David Cameron was pretty confident of that. But it was remarkable. The plane took off. It didn't fall out of the sky. The Italian customs agent did not spit on my passport as I walked through. A newly independent Brit, but with their typical courtesy and charm, allowed me through. And I remember, as if it was yesterday, walking into the hall, as I said, a little nervous in this hall full of Europeans, all in the EU, and all, yes, a little skeptic towards the EU, but not quite as skeptical as we were. And the conference opened immediately, and I think it was Yoram who opened with this wonderful speech saluting us, saluting Britain, and saluting the confidence that our people had shown in voting to recover our sovereignty and our national freedoms and our independence. It was a wonderful moment, and it was the first time I'd had any contact with these national conservatives, but I immediately thought, these are my people, these are my friends, because these people are the true Europeans. That was my sense in that hall as the discussions unfolded over the next 2 or 3 days. I felt European, and so did all the Brits who were with us over that conference. I think it was the first European conference we had done. And the cheers in that hall were an expression of what felt like family affection, extended from nations to another nation. And it was a response that I think was utterly incomprehensible to the Eurocratic mind, but one that made perfect sense, I want to put it to you, to the European mind. Why do I say that? Well, I want you to imagine yourselves as a proverbial alien descending upon the planet in around about 1500, and your glowing green eye scans across the world. And you're thinking, now, which bit of this planet is going to be most successful over the next 300, 400, 500 years? And I put it to you that the proverbial alien would not have picked out the northwestern rim of Eurasia, a pretty unprepossessing piece of land, terrible weather, the second smallest continent, a surface area less than half the Sahara Desert. How would you really have expected this little corner of land to become the greatest crucible of civilization that human beings have ever known? I don't think you would, and this is what historians have called the European miracle, or the Great Divergence. How is it that this corner of land leapt forward, leaving behind all the great civilization states that we had known before, and eclipsing all of them by a country mile? The glories of high scholasticism, the birth of the university, the Renaissance, the age of discovery, the commercial revolution, the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the technological revolution. All of these really started here. And the Enlightenment was not, as my liberal friends back home like to suggest, an invention of universal values ex nihilo. The Enlightenment was an efflorescence of 5 centuries of human genius, all of which began in this tiny corner of land, continental Europe, and the British Isles, of course. So how are we to explain it? How do we explain this? Well, let me give you a clue. I mean, let me suggest that it wasn't English cuisine. I don't think it was the German sense of humor, although actually we've had some good German sense of humor today. I don't think it was Italian punctuality or the French appetite for a hard day's work. And you can carry on. And no one's going to claim, looking at the history of the last 500 years, that it was some unique propensity for peace and harmony and goodwill to all. No. The secret to the European miracle was that Europe became a family of open societies. The nations of Europe were not the squabbling tenants of a Shah or a Shogun, of a Khan or a Caliph, of a Mughal or a Ming emperor. The peoples of Europe were neighbors, yes, competing fiercely against each other, sometimes as foes, very often as foes, and often as friends, but always united by a single organizing horizon. Effectively, Christendom. Christendom built, as we heard from the Cardinal, on revelation and reason, on Hebraism and Hellenism, the 2 great engines of Western civilization. The European miracle, I put it to you, was possible because a family of nations broke free from the unitary dirigist state apparatus of the great civilization states that European nations eclipsed. We, the peoples of Europe, were the first to experiment with political pluralism, the dispersal of power, diversity of political mechanisms, decentralization, the democratizing of freedoms, ideas that would flower all across the world, starting with our Anglosphere cousins in North America and the Antipodes. Catholic Christianity's emphasis on natural law, on monogamy, on strict marriage laws, as Joe Enrich at Harvard, secular agnostic, has argued recently, that was the secret sauce. That's what broke down the intensive clans and tribal networks and extended households and gave birth to what we now know as the nuclear family. And the Reformation, not to be left out, provided the booster shot. The Reformation democratizes literacy, it democratizes education. And that in turn, both of these powered the Enlightenment revolutions. And look, you know all of this: rule of law, property rights, enforcement of contracts, financial instruments, representative government, consumerism, the work ethic, competition. All of these began. They were not necessarily unique to Europe, but there was something unique about the ferment that generated them and that gave these extraordinary ideas so much momentum and energy. And these were gifts that the peoples of Europe gave to the world. They were gifts that transcended race and tribe and kinship and class and language and religion and indeed nation. Gifts that have made the world what it is today. Historians like to joke that in its twilight phase, the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, it was not Roman, and it was not an empire. I am sometimes tempted to suggest that the European Union is neither European nor really a union. It's not a union because virtually every story that I come across, to my mind, about the EU is about how on earth we keep this whole thing together. It just seems to be a permanent problem. How do we keep this union a union? And nor do I think, for the reasons I've set out earlier, do I think it's truly European, in that I don't think the European Union cultivates that authentic spirit of the peoples of Europe, that willingness, that openness, the freedom, skepticism of centralized, dirigiste, top-down state apparatus mechanisms. In many ways, I think the European Union was motivated by nervousness, by fear, by despair. Certainly Britain, when we voted to join in the mid-70s, it was probably at our lowest point. I sometimes wonder if the vote had been 10 years before or 10 years later, would we really have gone for it? We were really at our lowest as a nation. And different countries had different reasons for joining, but I would suggest to you on the whole, they were not always positive, exuberant, optimistic reasons. And indeed, those countries like Switzerland and Norway and Iceland, with swagger and confidence and optimism, don't seem terribly interested in joining the European Union. There's a lot to be proud of, but the European Union does not seem to want to celebrate the great achievements of Europe. The late Pope Benedict once remarked that the celebration of European exceptionalism is now taboo across the institutional landscape of our different nations. He wrote, "Europhobia, it seems, is now the reigning pathology of the European Union." And I think there's certainly some truth to that. A thought just came to me. The same colleagues who told me I was crazy to vote for Brexit in 2016 are now telling me that my curriculum at Cambridge is too Eurocentric. Go figure. It's a little anecdote, but I think it distills this contradiction that I'm trying to put on the table for you. Just in crude GDP terms, in 1970, the EU's global share of GDP was around about 35%. It's now, I think, about 14%, and it's been going down every year since 1970, and there's no real signs that it's going to be picking up anytime soon. The rule of law has become the rule of lawyers, or as we saw today, the rule of law enforcement, arbitrarily delivered. Human rights are being weaponized, as we know, through the Strasbourg courts. Anti-democratic living instrument doctrine. One thing I took away from Suella Braverman's speech today is that it's time to get Strexit done. How about representative democracy? How are we doing on that front in the EU? Well, I used to play a parlour game with my colleagues at Oxford over the Brexit period. And I used to ask them, senior professors in politics, who is Oxford's MEP? Who is Oxford's member of the European Parliament? I asked 25 colleagues, not one of them could tell me who Oxford's member of the European Parliament. And why should they know who Oxford's MEP was? They never voted for them. Nobody votes for them. The turnouts are about 3 or 4%. There is a serious crisis, or there was a serious crisis of democratic legitimacy. And I played other parlour games too. I used to ask them for the names of 2 of the 5 EU presidents, and no one could give me more than 2, and very few could give me even that. So anyway, there are problems. And as we've seen since Brexit in the last 2 or 3 years, extraordinary bullying and bribing and blackmailing nations simply for the crime of keeping their promises to their electorates and to acting in the interests of their own people. And that's monstrous, and I think that the national conservatism as a movement understands that problem as a serious one and one that needs to be addressed. Let me close with this. 2 months ago, the organizing committee was thrilled to read in The Economist, of all places, the house magazine of Western liberalism, an article written with deep anxiety about the growing influence of national conservatism. Liberalism, he concluded, can adapt to national conservatism, but right now it's falling behind. Quite an admission. And too right. The citizens of many Western countries, he wrote, see illegal migration as a source of disorder. Yes, they do. And so do the NatCons. They worry that their children will grow up to be poorer, than they are if they have any children. They believe that institutions like universities and the press have been captured by hostile, illiberal elites. They see the globalists who've thrived in recent decades as members of a self-serving, arrogant caste who like to believe that they rose to the top in a meritocracy when in reality their success was inherited. Yes, yes, and yes. Yoram could not have put it better himself. Liberals, those on the left, are running scared of national conservatism. They see what I think European electorates are increasingly beginning to see, and as we will see in the elections in 2 months' time, that it is national conservatives who understand their fears and, more importantly, who can offer a more hopeful vision. And that's why I'm so proud to be associated with the movement, and I know that you all are here, and I'm sure you'll agree with me that it is the most exciting and promising attempt to create a conservative internationale in living memory, forging together the very best strands of Anglosphere and European conservatism. Friends, we are the true Europhiles. Let us conduct ourselves as we have conducted ourselves today in the battles ahead with the courage, conviction, humor, good grace, and an indefatigable confidence that the true spirit of European unity can be recovered again for our children. Thank you.